Hello, and welcome back to Bedtime Stories. Tonight we're going to be continuing our reading of Mr. Tweedy. We took a little break for VBS and some other things, but we're back with the story of Mr. Tweedy with Chapter 22. The park at Sayre, in comparison with the New England park, was far from lovely. However, it did afford us some shade. While the children went off alone for a swim, I remained in the trailer with a most unhappy little bird. It was obvious that he wanted to go with the children, despite the fact that he could barely hold up his head. For the longest while he sat listlessly by the window, gazing longingly in the direction which they had taken. Heartsick over his behavior, I talked to him as I would to a sickly child, as if he understood and appreciated my concern. He hopped on my finger, and then I remembered how he had helped me with Kathy. Reaching beside the seat, I found the old straw fan, and then I did for him what I had done for my child. It was amazing to see how he responded to the stirring air. First, his eyes took interest in the swaying object. Then, in a little while, he ruffled his feathers and stretched out his wings. Then, finally, he chirped, hopped off my finger, and wanted to play with the fan. When he hopped onto the edge of it, I gently raised and lowered it over and over again. As if by magic, once again, I had a happy little clown. Look at Mr. Tweedy and the fan. Obviously, he thought that riding up and down on a fan was great sport, and so we played until the children returned. One mischievous robin welcoming them with a hearty scolding for leaving him behind. As Mr. Tweedy now seemed well enough to travel, I decided to push on into Texas. By dusk, we were crossing the state line and singing "The Stars at Night Are Big and Bright," with our robin blending in beautifully with his dear little cheerlees. How good it felt once again to be traveling like gypsies, filling the Texas air with songs. At night, we stopped in a little trailer park in Shamrock, where the children and Mr. Tweedy had great fun searching for locusts with flashlights. Quite frankly, I was rather surprised that their robin didn't put up a fuss about venturing forth after dark. But as soon as the park was fairly well lit, perhaps this made a difference. Furthermore, he was perched on Dave's shoulder during the entire hunt, and being close to the one he loved the most, he would have been happy doing most anything. As to the locust, when Dave finally caught a live one and put it into a glass jar, Mr. Tweedy would have nothing to do with the monstrous buzzard. He'd look at the glass jar and then look at Dave, as if he were trying to make sense of something stupid. A buzzing bug in a jar? In the end, Dave let the locust go. The following morning, when Mr. Tweedy awakened me bright and early, I was overjoyed at the way he was anxious for me to get his breakfast. A hearty appetite was the best sign I could have hoped for, and this morning he ate like a little glutton. After taking advantage of the park's facilities by catching up to the heavier part of the laundry backlog, doing all the sheets from the bunks, once again we headed down the endless road. A hot wind was blowing, and my thought was to hasten us across the devil's country before a robin was stricken again. At Groom, we stopped only briefly to buy some sandwiches to eat in the car. At Groom, it says. I don't know what that means. While we were purchasing our lunch, Mr. Tweedy had contentedly waited for us on his perch, the car being parked in the shade beneath the roof. Up to this point, he had seemed as normal as ever. Shortly thereafter, I didn't know what to make of him. He had passed a huge sign reading "Dangerous Crosswinds." Being completely unfamiliar with this country, I had no idea how many miles these crosswinds covered. From the looks of the wide expanse of sky and the vast reaches of uninterrupted prairie, they could cover from here to eternity. Wanting to get us through this section of Texas as fast as possible, I accelerated the car to top speed and went barreling down the road. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, Mr. Tweedy began flying around in the car. First he was on my head, then on top of the dashboard. From there the steering wheel, then back to my head. "What's the matter with him?" I shouted. For a moment I thought we must have been deranged by the heat. But when I stopped the car, he flew nonchalantly out the window, circled the trailer, and flew back in. The clown only wanted a bit of exercise. I thought irritably, "Don't you ever do that to me again," I snapped. This had been too much, scaring the wits out of me, endangering our lives. Mr. Tweedy cocked his head at me, and then he chirped the saddest little chirp I had ever heard. The children had gone out of the trailer to check on the tires and hitch, as they always did when we stopped. Just then I heard Kathy shout excitingly, "Come here, quick, Mom, look!" Part of the trailer hitch was broken. The cotter pin had been sheared off, and only a quarter-inch of metal was holding the vital stabilizing bar in place. Had we continued and had the heavy bar fallen loose, or a crosswind hit us, it might have meant disaster. Why Mr. Tweedy had acted as he did, I will never know. Perhaps he had just been frightened, traveling at such an unusual speed. Whatever the reason, it had given me much food for thought. After some makeshift repairs, we drove slowly to Amarillo and found a garage. While the young mechanic fixed the hitch, the children told him about our bird and how many times he had helped us. I sure wouldn't mind having a lucky charm like that myself, he said to me. If you'd like to sell him, man, I'd be glad to buy him. Sell Mr. Tweedy? Not for all the money in the world, I answered. That ends the reading of chapter 22. Tune in tomorrow for chapter 23. Let's end with a bedtime prayer. Holy God, thank you for this day. Thank you for giving us sleep the previous night. Thank you for giving us this day to enjoy, and I pray that we get good sleep tonight so that we wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, revived, and ready to take on the day. Lord, I pray these things all in your precious holy name. Amen. Good night.